So a very warm welcome to this series of webinars on the theme of a life well lived, a theme that most people would consider something that is a question that's important to them. What does it take to live our lives well? So in the first session, we explored a month ago what it means to wake up, to really come alive and awake to our lives. And what I'd like to do today in the theme is to move to the second session, the second theme, the second chapter, if you like, which is to pay attention, a theme of developing attention and awareness to presence in every day with a sense of lifelong learning and flexibility. So one of the things I invited us all to consider in the first session was the appreciation practice. So having woken up, the invitation was to consider, what does it mean to really pause and look in a way more deeply into the small moments of our day and see what there is there to really appreciate. And it'd be nice to have a sense for you to think now as you think back over the last month, maybe starting with today and the last week, of what have been some of those moments of appreciation. I'll just give you a chance to kind of scan your mind back to what that might look like. And while you do that, I'm going to pull up a poem which I came across just very recently from a poet called Alex Dimitrov. And in a way, it's a poem that is quite long, but it is his kind of appreciation of all the things in his life. And I'm going to read the first half now, and then I'm going to read the second half at the end of this webinar. He calls it love. I love you early in the morning, and it's difficult to love you. I love the January sky and knowing it will change, although unlike us. I love watching people read. I love midnight. I love writing letters, and this is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. I love snow, and briefly. I love the first minutes in a warm room after stepping out of the cold. I love my 20s, and I want them back every day. I love time. I love people. I love people and my time, away from them the most. Let me reread that. I love people and my time away from them the most. I love the part of my desk that's darkened by my elbows. I love space. So what Alex is doing in this poem, in a way, is he is dropping into the small moments of appreciation in his life. And what we were exploring in the last webinar was this idea that shifting our attention, shifting our awareness to aspects of our inner and outer life that we can appreciate can be a profoundly transformative experience. What I want to do is, I'll come back to that poem at the end, but what I want to do now is to turn to this theme of attention. And here's a question I want to ask you. What if every day, from the moment you wake to the moment you fall asleep, you had an attention budget? In the same way we have a monetary budget. Would you give it all away? Would you spend it all at random? So what I'd like to ask you to do is just think back to the day so far and what it is from your day that you think you have spent your attentional budget on. What I mean by that is what would you say has drained the battery of your attentional resource today? I'll get you started as I think back through my day. The drive into work along quite busy roads takes quite a lot of concentration, quite a lot of effort. There's a sense of the battery dipping down a few notches as I do that. Looking at my email and the various questions and things that people need in my email, trying to put myself in their shoes and asking what do they need. Again, a demand on the attentional budget. Here are some others. Worry. The pervasiveness of worry can be a real drain on our attention. The distractions of our day can be a real drain on our attention. It's a good question to ask ourselves. If we think we start the day with a sense of a budget of 100%, what ticks that downwards as we go through the day? So here are 6 radical ideas about attention. And I want to do this in a way that actually we also just do this in a kind of experiential way. So inviting you now just to pause and check in. Simply coming to pause and rest your awareness in your mind and in your body, and just check into what is the shape of my mind right now? What is the kind of landscape of my mind just now? Is it rested? Is it tired? Does it feel vitalized? Does it feel slothful? Just scan through the body. Does the body feel alive? Does it feel tired? Does it feel achy, or does it feel at ease? So just checking in. So here is the first radical idea about your attention. In this landscape of your body and mind, you have a choice about where you place your attention. And see if you can choose somewhere in the landscape of your body and mind where you'd like, where it feels right, where it feels nourishing to rest your awareness just now. It could be your breath in your belly or in your nostrils. It could be the feeling of touch on your hands. You have a choice about choosing somewhere in the landscape of your body and your mind to place your attention. Just let your awareness rest there. Just now. You have made that choice to rest your awareness there just now. And as you let your awareness rest there, here's the second radical idea. More than likely, there will be aspects of your experience, wherever you've rested your awareness, that have got some qualities that are pleasant. For example, if it's the breath in the belly, there might be a sense of ease, a sense of letting go on the out-breath. There might be a sense of contraction or hunger, contact with the belt of whatever clothing we're wearing. So the second radical idea is that normally, when we place our attention somewhere, there are a range of experiences there. And we can move between the pleasant and the unpleasant. Of course, not always, but often. Here's the third idea, which is in a way quite radical, quite simple, but quite radical. You can choose to focus your attention inwardly or outwardly. So you can take the torch beam of your awareness, rest it somewhere in your body or your mind, or you can now take your attention, your awareness, and move it somewhere outside of the body and outside of the body. The sounds maybe. to something that you can see, maybe something that you're touching. So what you're doing is you're very deliberately shifting from inner to outer. Just coming back to an awareness of somewhere in the body. And here's the next radical idea about attention. You can choose which senses to foreground. You can choose to foreground bodily sensations. You can choose to foreground sounds. You can choose to foreground touch, perhaps the contact points of your hands with whatever they're touching just now. And now these last two ideas about attention, maybe a bit more subtle, but potentially also really transformative. So Mary Oliver writes in one of her poems, "Attention without feeling is only a report. Attention without feeling is only a report." And what I'd like to suggest to you now is that you can actually, if you think about your attention as being a bit like a flashlight, you can change the lens on the flashlight. You can maybe dial up a sense of kindness, bringing a friendly kindness to what's happening in your body and mind just now. Maybe dial up a sense of curiosity and interest. So this is quite a subtle, but really potentially quite transformative idea that with the lens of our awareness, with the flashlight of our awareness, with even the floodlight of our awareness, we can potentially change the filter, change the lens, so that these attitudes of curiosity, of kindness, of care, of courage, of balance, can all be dialed up or sometimes even dialed down. We have this capacity to kind of upregulate certain things, but potentially also downregulate things with these lenses that we bring in our attention. And here's the final thing I want to say about attention that is really important in this sense of a life well lived. It seems a strange idea, but at some level, our values are shaping our attention. And even if they're not, they have the potential to shape our attention. Where do we choose to place our attention? Why do we choose to place it there? One of the things that I think it was Simone Weil talked about was our attention, again, this is linked to the idea of lenses, can be a tremendous act of generosity. Giving our attention to a topic, a person, or some aspect of our own development, our own learning, can be a tremendous act of generosity. So these 6 radical ideas, we can choose where to place our attention. We can choose to focus on pleasant or unpleasant facets of our experience. We can focus internally or externally. We can choose, we can sort of in a way pivot between different senses. We can change the lens. Mary Oliver, attention without feeling is only a report. So attention with feeling becomes mindfulness. And our values can pivot our attention. So I'd like to suggest another idea, another question, if you like, and ask you to contemplate this question, which is, When you think back through your day today, what has charged your attentional budget? What in a way has been a surplus to your attentional budget? And maybe just take a moment to think about that. So when I think about it from my day that's just gone, obviously sleep. Sleep is tremendously nourishing and charging of our attentional budget. Music. And choosing different types of music that we know can be charging of our attentional budget. Certain people, being around certain people, can be very nourishing of our attentional budget. Being in nature, connecting with nature in a way that can feel like it's calming. And of course, different types of mindfulness practice can be focusing and nourishing in particular ways. We're social animals, so physical touch and connection can be nourishing. We're also physical animals, so physical exercise, yoga, movement can be nourishing. So this idea of attention as something that we have some volition, some intentionality around, and as a resource that we can manage, I think is a really important insight and a practice around attention. And what I want to do now is just to turn a little bit to the psychological science, and I want to draw on one of the leading people in this area who has talked about attention as being made up of three different structures and functions, if you like. So this is Amishi Jha at the University of Miami. And she kind of makes a really helpful differentiation between different types of attention and what they're there for and how we can relate to them. And I find her sort of her typology, if you like, really very helpful, not just in terms of thinking about it, but in terms of its implications. The first she calls our alarm system. And it's always on. It can't not be on. It's a deep brain system that is constantly looking for things that are novel, unusual, unexpected, threatening. And the minute it picks them up, and it's running all the time, beneath awareness, and the minute it picks something up that is novel, that is threatening, there's whatever, it's like an alarm bell. It comes into the foreground. And we have no control over this. And there's absolutely no evidence that I'm aware of anyway, that this kind of alerting attention, this alarm attention, is any way changed by mindfulness practice. In a way, that's not the purpose of mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice is in a way just honoring this kind of deep alarm system. It's there for very good reasons. But what's very interesting is I'm reminded of an experiment with Matthew Ricard, sometimes described as one of the happiest people alive, although he himself has questioned that. But he was placed in, I think, in a scanning situation, but at least with a sort of a brain scanning kind of net on. And they let off a starter gun behind him. And what they were interested in was whether or not his alerting, his alarm signal was any different from anybody else. And it wasn't any different whatsoever. There was no evidence that it was different in terms of his startle response, but what happened in his brain, what happened with his heart rate. It was completely the same as anybody else. But what was different was his ability to down-regulate afterwards. So this is the first kind of attention. The second kind of attention is what Amishi Jha calls orienting attention. And I think the metaphor that's really helpful here is of something being a bit like a flashlight and a floodlight, that we can choose, as we did with the practice just now, where to focus our awareness. A bit like the flashlight of the beam of a flashlight, but also possibly to broaden our awareness out to a sense of a floodlit awareness of, for example, our body or all of the sounds in physical space around us. And the third kind of attention is what she calls kind of the juggler, if you like. It's the part of our attention, the executive system, that is juggling all the different demands on us. And I think what's so interesting about the executive system, which people often forget, is that context and stress are really important to our ability to manage juggling. When we're tired, when we feel overwhelmed, when there's a lot going on, our ability to juggle all of the demands on us are compromised. When we're in a good place, when there's a sense of appreciation, there's a sense of pleasure, there's a sense of joy, our ability to juggle is much enhanced. And that's one of the things that mindfulness practice absolutely can work with, can enhance, can help with. One of the other things I want to just say about attention is to honor the fact that it is a protector. It's serving us, our attentional capacity, our incredible skill and ability to pay attention in the ways I've just described, has this protective function. Obviously, our alarm system, but well beyond that, in ways that I think are a bit more subtle and where mindfulness practice begins to support us in this protective way. Pain and discomfort is an obvious example. When we have pain and discomfort, it's a bit like a sort of signal. It's like a console on a car where it's saying, you know, there's something that maybe needs looking at, needs paying attention to, maybe a service is required, maybe something needs renewing or replenishing. Fatigue, obviously the need to urinate or defecate. The menstrual cycle has many signals. Sexual arousal, and really crucially, our overall level of arousal. Being able to tune in and ask, are we really quite flat just now? And is there a need to upregulate? Or are we feeling quite frantic and a bit overwhelmed? And is there a need to downregulate? So in this way, attention has this capacity to be kind of like a guide and a sort of an indicator of what's needed in a given moment. And we were talking earlier about worry and anxiety. All of the major mental health conditions have an algorithm that is driving our attention. The anxiety disorders, attention is driven by an algorithm of threat. Depression is driven by an algorithm of negativity about the self, about others, about the future, about the world. PTSD is an algorithm of imminent threat in this moment from memories of something bad that's happened in the past. So I want to just move in a moment to how we can train our attention, how we can cultivate our attentional capacity. But just before I do that, I want to just describe a story from something that happened to me at the weekend. I was away with my sister, and we were in a hotel. And in the breakfast room, there were a number of families with children that were just running around all over the dining room, shouting, screaming, knocking things on the floor. It seemed pretty out of control, actually. It seemed pretty kind of potentially destructive. And there was a real sense of concern that certainly I had for those children and also their parents. And at a certain point, one of these little children, 4-year-old, saw me looking at him, and he met a 4-year-old child, and he stuck his middle finger up at me. I thought, gosh, that's interesting. And it made me think, what was the behavior of that child and those other children trying to convey? What were they communicating about their needs? And what about their families who weren't able to provide maybe the boundaries that they needed, the attention that they needed, the guardrails that they needed? What were they communicating about their needs? And it reminded me of traveling as a young 20-year-old in Thailand. And I remember sitting on buses of journeys of about 7 hours and being amazed that there'd be children on those buses for 7 hours who somehow seemed able to sit with discomfort and heat and distractions. What is the difference in how we can listen to what those children are saying and what those children need? And what we're doing with Mindfulness for Life is we are saying that our attention is a really valuable resource. And it's something that we should not only caretake, but that we should train. So what I'd like to do now is just to shift into two forms of practice. The first is a sort of formal practice. So what I'd like to ask you to do now is just to come to a sense where your body just shifts into a position where it feels quite deliberately upright. And just see if from the body, from the inside out, there can be a sense of the body moving into a posture that communicates a sense of presence and dignity. What is that like if you bring your awareness to the body, communicating from the inside out, a sense of awareness and dignity? And then when you're ready, just take your awareness and rest it somewhere in the body that can serve for you like an anchor that can rest on the ground and give you a sense of groundedness, a sense of steadiness. And let your awareness rest in this anchor. It might be in the belly, it might be elsewhere in the body. How is it to rest your awareness in this part of the body? Open to the bodily sensations, pleasant and unpleasant. And when the mind wanders to sounds or reactivity or anything else, just coming back to this anchor. That's what an anchor's for, after all. To ground us, to keep us steady. And then when you're ready, in your own way, take your awareness like a flashlight to the soles of your feet. So there's the sensations of the soles of the feet. And remember what we were saying earlier about this idea of lenses. So with the flashlight of your awareness, just a lens of curiosity, of kindness, of care. And just move the flashlight of your awareness up through the body with this sense of interest, this sense of coming home to the body as a friend. And if that's not possible, just coming home to the body as it is. Nothing to fix, nothing to change. Being curious about, being open to whatever you discover. Through the legs, through the pelvis. Through the lower back and the torso. Through the fingers, the thumbs, the hands. What you're doing here is you're taking the flashlight of awareness very deliberately open to the pleasant, to the unpleasant, an internal focus with a lens, curiosity of kindness, of care, sweeping up through the arms, the shoulders, neck, face, and the head. And then, if it feels possible, if it feels okay, broadening your awareness out now. So instead of a flashlight, it becomes like a floodlight. And what I mean by that is the whole of the body is floodlit. So you're resting your awareness in the whole of the body, the myriad feelings, sensations, experiences that are available to awareness in the body just now. And so many others that aren't, that are just bubbling away just beyond awareness. And see if you can now take the floodlight of your awareness and broaden it out again. So there's a sense of inner and outer. There's a sense of the body as a whole, but there's also the outside world. And if your eyes are closed, there's a sense of sounds. If they're open, sense of sounds and things that you can see. So there's a broader awareness, an awareness that's inner and outer. And again, just remembering those lenses. And the other thing that's really interesting about this is the anchor. It's always there as something potentially you can come back to. So as we just bring this body scan practice to a close, just see if you can have this sense of coming back to this idea of a life well lived and sort of intentionality of this body scan practice, this awareness of the body is something that can always be available to you throughout the day. As you go into your day, as you go into an interaction with someone else, as you end your day, as you fall asleep, as you wake up, your body is always available to you. It's always there as a potential place to train your attention, to bring your awareness. And we'll move in future webinars to the importance of the body and the importance of the body scan. But for now, it's a practice for the cultivation of attention of the body. The second major way in which we can cultivate our attention is in our everyday life. So here's another question. In your everyday life, if your attention was like your income and savings, so if you had a budget, how would you manage it? If your attention was like your income and your savings, as you move through your day, how would you manage it? So here's some thoughts that come to mind. If we take this analogy, there has to be some sense of matching our income to our expenditure. I don't want to overdo this metaphor of an attentional budget, but there are kind of like electronic devices now that people wear, different makes, Fitbit, Apple, Aura, so on, which give a sense of our readiness based on how well we've slept and the extent to which our parasympathetic nervous system has been active through the night. And so it's in a way calibrating how much resource we have in a given day. And it's guides us, these devices guide and say, today is a day to maybe take it a little bit easy, just to not overdo things, to maybe try and pace yourself if you can. And I guess what mindfulness practice is doing is it's helping us to do that without the need for a device. To say, actually, my resources are a little bit depleted today. So maybe I can just ease off here, or I can do more of what nourishes me there. For some people, this might be just entering into the day with a sense of curiosity. Because curiosity is antithetical to lethargy and to shut down. It's an opening up. It's a sort of wakening up. So curiosity can drive that sense of, in a way, replenishing us and nourishing us. Slowing down, all of those appreciative things that we talked about at the beginning of the day can be nourishing in that sense. And when we do see that something is ticking the battery downwards, ruminative thought, getting caught in the vortex of worry, noticing that moment and choosing to step out and do something different. And anchors are so very important here. Knowing that in different times and different places, we can anchor and we can come back and ground and steady ourselves. So I want to just end with a sense of playfulness and a sense of attention and perception being something that we can go into our day and go into our week and go into our lives, if you like, being playful with. Because I suspect that the reality is, for most of us throughout our day, our attention is not something that we are intentionally deploying. We're being pulled by the demands of the day, demands of the traffic, demands of work pressures and demands, be that email, be that meetings, be that whatever it is that people are doing in their lives. To begin to shift that to a kind of more volitional and intentional frame enables the possibility of playfulness. And I want to just give a couple of examples of this. I'm thankful for the first one to Maggie Farrow, who sent me this amazing video of her with her grandchild when her grandchild was, I'm going to guess, about 6 months old. And the grandchild was eating the first ever strawberry that he had encountered. And it was extraordinary. First, with the attention of his touch, his feel, he squeezed this thing. He was delighted that the strawberry crushed in his hands and all this juice went everywhere, and it was red and it was vibrant. And then he sort of carefully brought it to his mouth. My goodness, his eyes, the sweetness of it. He was really surprised that this red explosion in his hand was really very sweet. He very quickly tried to put as much of the pulp into his mouth as possible. And so what he was doing in a kind of very beginner's mind kind of way was playing with this idea of touching food he'd never seen before, tasting a food he'd never tasted before, and just feeling it running down his face and running down his hands. And you could see also that his grandmother, Maggie, was delighted at this. And actually, she too had this idea of, wouldn't it be fun to relate to a strawberry in this way? I want to give you another example. This is an example of from a character in the book Mindfulness for Life, Mohammed, who was parenting his 2 young children. and as many people who've parented children will know, is that children can sort of make up their minds about, I don't like this food, I don't like that food, I won't eat this food, I won't like that food. And very quickly you can have quite a narrow set of foods that a child will potentially eat. So Mohammed had a mindfulness practice, and he himself had been exploring food in terms of taste and smell and cooking and so on. And he managed to convince his kids to do this experiment. And the experiment of this was, with their consent, how would you feel if I blindfolded you and we did a taste test? I give you a whole bunch of foods and you try them out. You tell me what you notice about the foods. And the kid said, "Oh, we don't want to do that." And so, well, there'll definitely be some foods that you love in there. There might even be some ice cream. And they went, "Oh, okay. As long as there's no broccoli and there's no cauliflower." And I said, "Okay, no broccoli, no cauliflower." And so what he did was he got a whole range of different foods, and he asked his children, I think they were sort of 6, 7, 8, something like that, to try this sort of smell, taste of hummus, of bread, of ice cream, of green beans, of whatever it might be. And the children were able to relate to this food with these different senses of touch, of smell, of taste, in a way that sort of bypassed good, bad, like, don't like. This is the way it's going to be. And that kind of playfulness with perception and with attention is something that we can all potentially bring into our lives. So I want to finish with obstacles. What do people say gets in the way of this sense of intentionally bringing greater attention and awareness into our day-to-day lives? Well, the first is there is a reality. Of course, there is a reality of there are many, many pulls on our attention. And many of those are incredibly powerful and incredibly pressing. And much is spoken about social media, which of course is designed to grab and keep our attention. That's the first. But in a way, what I'm suggesting is that we can potentially begin to develop the skills, the discernment, the values to begin to choose how we relate to some of those things. The second kind of topic, if you like, that I want to raise is mind wandering. Inevitably, when people start to bring their attention to their body, to everyday activities, to, as we saw with the eating exercise, the mind will wander. And one of the most important things that can happen with mindfulness practice and in the hands of a skilled mindfulness teacher is the realization that mind wandering is an incredibly important and actually quite rich and quite vital part of our experience. It's what minds do. Minds, through the alerting, the alarm signal, are pulled to different topics. But minds also have a free associative quality. Think about dreams. Think about flow states. When we have this sense of mind wandering as being part of what minds do, we can begin to bring awareness to mind wandering. We can bring a sense of volition, of interest, of curiosity, of letting be, but then coming back to whatever we're focused on in a given moment. That kind of shift in our relationship to mind wandering, I think, is really important. And the final big one that I just want to mention as an obstacle that is, I think, really gets in the way for many people is this sense of I don't have time. And the shift here, I think, is that yes, sometimes we don't have time. But as we navigate through all of the small moments of even a very busy day, all of those 6 things that I said earlier could potentially come into play. We can choose where we place our attention. We can focus inside, outside, on the pleasant, on the unpleasant. We can shift the lens. We don't have to do anything different. We can go, the kind of really key thing here is that the day in a sense is no different, but how we are bringing our attention to the day is what we are beginning to do in a different way. So just to summarize, attention can be like an alarm system, a protector, a flashlight, an anchor, and a way of opening new doorways. At the turn of the last century, William James, the brother of Henry, often called the first psychologist, talked about it as being one of the most foundational human skills. And then he made a really interesting statement. He said, but we don't know how to train it. And what I think I'm saying is that 100 plus years later, drawing on contemplative traditions, on ancient wisdom, and on psychological science, we do know how to train it. We know a lot about attention and how to train it. Yes, it might be a big ask, but we can do this. That when we do, I think some of the benefits can be about bringing a sense of values and a sense of intentionality to our attention. It is, after all, the gateway to all of our experience. It's how we create and make the world, both our internal world, but the world of our relationality, but also perhaps potentially broader beyond that. So I want to just finish with Alex Dimitrov again. I want to just go to the end of his poem. So in a sense, it's a poem which he called Love, simply Love. And actually, I'm going to go, it's 9 pages long. These are all the ways in which Alex Dimitrov loves his life. I love all animals. I love that we continue to invent meaning. I love the blue hours between 3 and 5 when Plath wrote Ariel. I love that despite having one body, there are many ways to live. I love November because I was born there. I love people who've quit their jobs to be artists. I love you for reading this as opposed to anything else. I love the nostalgia of the future. I love that the tallest mountain in our solar system is safe and on Mars. I love dancing. I love being in love with the wrong people. I love how athletes believe in the body and know that it will fail them. I love dessert for breakfast. I love gardens. I love holding my breath underwater. I love whoever it is untying our shoes. I love that December is summer in Australia. I love statues in a downpour. I love diners. I love that the stars can be touched. I love ritual. I love chants too. I love people who have quietly survived being understood, yet remain kids. I love the different ways we have of saying the same thing. And I love anyone who cannot say goodbye. So thank you very much for your attention.